everyone. Good morning. Good morning. I'm Hank Philippi Ryan, and this is because it's Thursday at 11:30 a.m. EST. This is First Chapter Fun. I am live right here on Instagram and checking now to see that I'm live on Facebook. Yes, that looks good. Don't you love it when everything works? It happens so seldom these days. So hello to you all here on Instagram and hello to you all here on Facebook. I'm Hank Philippi Ryan, and this is episode 71, if you can believe it, of First Chapter Fun. I see people just clamoring into Instagram, and that's wonderful. Hi, Glennie. Hi, AR Mommy. And Debro and Decca. Are you, Decca? Are you new? I'd love to hear if you are here for the first time. It's so gratifying to have people arrive here for the first time. Hi, Tracy. It's interesting because I know that you're telling your friends about First Chapter Fun, and that's so great when more people come. Hey, Carla. Hey, Allie. Hey, Jamie. And Bonnar Spring is here today, of course, and for all of you who are here to listen to Bonnar's wonderful first chapter, Bonnar Spring's wonderful first chapter. She is doing a giveaway, and we are so thrilled to hear about that. So she will tell you about that in the comments. So welcome, everyone. I'm sort of stalling at the beginning to make sure that everybody is here. When I started going live this morning, it was 11:29 here on my Instagram and 12:30 on my Facebook. 11:29 here on Instagram and 11:30 here on Facebook. And I'm not quite sure how the time is so crazily out of joint, but it does seem to be. So we're glad you made it. We're glad I made it. We're glad Hannah, my partner in fictional crime, Hannah Mary McKinnon, is here, and Shannon and Carla and Allie. And hey, Jen, and hey, Mama Eponymous, and Susan Brown. Oh, this is great. I love seeing you all. So happy Thursday. Welcome. How are you this morning? Can you believe it's actually July? Is that so completely crazy? This is episode 71 of First Chapter Fun. And today, because so many of our vacations have been canceled or changed or rescheduled or just completely disheveled and thrown up in the air, we're going to take you to a little vacation, a little trip, not exactly what you might do on your vacation to Guatemala, but it is what Luz Concepcion is going to do on her trip to Guatemala, and we will see how that works out. So quickly, if you haven't been here before, the deal. We're broadcasting live here on Instagram and live here on Facebook. And sometimes these platforms just decide they don't want us to do this anymore and they boot us out. So if they do, it's us, it's not you, and we'll come back and read the complete first chapter for you on whatever platform crashes after we're done. Glennie is saying it's too hot. It is too hot, Glennie. It is 92 here in Boston. And it's going to be another hot day. And it's super hot here on First Chapter Fun. So that all the episodes are taped and you can see them on video in IGTV here on Instagram and on all our video archives on Facebook. And as of today, you will have 71 first chapters that you can dip into and taste and read, because our goal here, Hannah Mary McKinnon and I, want you to discover new books, want you to find authors that you've never heard of before who become your new favorite authors, and also to hear from your already favorite authors. We will bring you their brand new books as soon as they come out. So you set to go for First Chapter Fun. Let me congratulate Hannah Mary McKinnon yet again for being now week number 6 on the Canadian fiction bestseller list. That is amazingly cool. So she's such a rock star, isn't she, Sharon? I'm waving back at Sharon and waving back at Samara 1016. Are you new too? Have you been here before? I love that we're getting so many new people. That is just great. And over here on Facebook, I see Beth and Susan and Kristen Barrow Keefe, whose book we'll be reading, Agatha Arch is Afraid of Everything. Which is such a hilarious title and such a hilarious book. Daisy Emily Bonnar again. Here's Bonnar on Facebook talking about what her giveaway is. Simply say hi, Bonnar, in the messages, she says, and she'll enter you to win. Not a trip to Guatemala, really, but a trip to Guatemala via her book. So let's do this. Let's read about our book today is Toward the Light. Come on. Okay, fun with book covers. Toward the Light, and it's not working. How many times have I done this? Okay, Toward the Light by Bonnar Spring. Toward the Light by Bonnar Spring. Can you see that on Facebook? I want you to know that I cannot see the video on Facebook, so I don't know if this is working. I'm just hoping that it is. So you will have to let me know. Oh, that's interesting. Samara, and I don't know what your name is, 1016, but my birthday is October 17th. Are you born October 16th? She says, I live in Maryland, but I'm from Guatemala. So that's perfect, Bonnar. You two should get to know each other a little bit. So let's talk a little bit about Toward the Light, which we are reading the first chapter of today, pretty much all the first chapter, with the courtesy of Ocean View Publishing, a wonderful publisher, and the author, of course, Bonnar Spring. Both of them gave us permission to read from this terrific new book. Let me tell you a little bit about Bonnar first. I had the pleasure of being in conversation with her when she launched this book at Jabberwocky Books in northern Massachusetts. Gosh, when was that, Bonnar? 3 months ago or so, before all this, all the time sort of runs together. And it was a wonderful, huge crowd of people in person, if you can remember that. We all were together in person and all applauding Bonnar and her wonderful new book, and she was quite fantastic. So let me tell you a little bit about Bonnar Spring. Bonnar Spring, it says, learned to read in kindergarten and has never stopped. The restrictive policy of her town library, only 14 books per card, oh no, we had 10, I think we could take 10, led her to become omnivorous. Her brother's science fiction and adventure, her mother's mystery classics. Her father, well, those books hidden behind the hardcovers on the top shelf. Bonnar, is that really true? You'll read anything, of course. Jabberwocky, Kristen says. That is the name of the bookstore. More about Bonnar. A nomad at heart, she hitchhiked across Europe at 16 and joined the Peace Corps after college. She spent her most recent significant birthday climbing Huayna Picchu, the sugarloaf mountain behind Machu Picchu. Bonnar writes eclectic and stylish mystery suspense novels with an international flavor. She currently divides her time between tiny houses on a New Hampshire salt marsh and by the Sea of Abaco. So there is an adventure for you. Maybe we should just, after we read the first chapter, we should ask Bonnar how she possibly lives in a tiny house and how you do that. I bet that house is about as big as my study here. And that has always fascinated me, how people can be organized enough to live in that small a square. I think it's fewer than 500 square feet. Is that right, Bonnar? Well, let us know. Allie says, hi, Bonnar, you are a new author to me. Yes, and that is what this is all about. Yes, Sharon says, what a bio. I know. So many wonderful authors here on First Chapter Fun, and so many more to go. So let me tell you a little bit about Toward the Light, again from Ocean View Publishing. Can I make this work? You get it. Toward the Light. You can find it. Here's a little bit about Toward the Light. Luz Concepcion returns to Guatemala to murder Martin Benavides, the man who destroyed her family. Benavides, who rose from insurgent fighter to president, controls a major drug network. Richard Clement became Luz's resettlement officer when she was evacuated to the U.S. He now works for the CIA, which has its own reasons for eliminating Benavides. Richard's team persuades Luz to pursue a job as a nanny to Benavides' grandson Cesar, a lonely child with an absentee playboy father. The Guatemala contact for her mission is Evan McManus, an expat painter who pursues Luz, hoping to persuade him to model for her. No, persuade her to model for him. I'm reading too fast. Hoping to persuade her to model for him, and more. Luz initially spurns his advances, but her first terrifying encounter with Martin Benavides propels her into his arms. Complicating matters, Luz conceals from all sides her clandestine contact with her surviving cousin, Antonio Torres, a guerrilla leader fighting the government propped up by the Benavides and their drug money. Her plans unravel as bit by bit, Luz learns that nothing is as it seems, and no one is telling the whole truth. So we'll take you to Guatemala today, even though we can't go to real places in real life. We can at least travel in the pages of a book. And as I always say, it's always safe inside a book. So let's hear pretty much all of the first chapter of Toward the Light by Bonnar Spring, and welcome all of you today who are here listening to this. On a breezy autumn afternoon, Maria Luz Concepcion returned to Guatemala to kill a man. As the airplane banked, its descent through thick clouds brought the first view of her country in almost 20 years. Corrugated mountains, a trackless sea of green and brown. The plane drifted lower. Misty rectangles on hillsides resolved into a patchwork of fields and houses. A serpentine line became a road. A silver flash, a lake. Once at the gate, Luz joined the rolling wave of deplaning passengers. They all shuffled up the jetway and along the interminable corridor to Luz's first hurdle, immigration. The tide carried her toward black swinging doors at the far end that swallowed each arrival in turn. Then the doors flapped for her, and she emerged, not in the dark maw of some carnivorous beast, but in a bright, echoing room. As she waited her turn, Luz studied the gatekeepers who stood between her and Martin Benavides, the bald guy with thick Coke bottle glasses who barely looked at the supplicants but spent tedious minutes flipping each page of every passport, the bulldog-faced woman with the pen stuck in her hair and the crisp khaki uniform, the younger man who asked so many questions. They held the key to her future, these civil servants in their cages of glass and metal, destined to spend their days in noise and harsh light, vigilant against the undotted I, the uncrossed T, against criminals, the indigent, against young women planning murder. The talkative younger man beckoned. Luz's stomach rose to her throat. She pasted on a smile when she approached his kiosk. He stuck out a hand for her passport, a first-rate fake that gave her name as Luz Aranda. Once she relinquished it, Luz smoothed her skirt over her hips with damp palms and stood before him, fingers intertwined, mimicking as best she could the decorum of a Catholic schoolgirl at early morning mass. The agent flipped to the photo page. He squinted at her. Luz no longer believed in God, but the habit of prayer lingered. Bargaining, really. Dios, por favor. If you'll get me through immigration, I'll... What in heaven's name could she promise? Let me go home so I can kill Martin Benavides? No, keep it simple. Let me in, and I will never bother you again. Luz released her hands and wiggled her bloodless fingers, willing her expression into nonchalance, as the man compared her face to the photo. Too late and unnecessary. He'd already looked down and was riffling through the pages to stamp her entry. Ink-stained hand with fingernails bitten to the quick, a bald spot at the top of his head. Photo of a chubby woman holding a snaggle-toothed child tucked in the corner of the glass partition. Not a dragon guarding the gates, after all. Luz beamed when he handed back the passport. She'd taken one more small step toward Martin Benavides' death when the man said in soft Spanish that reminded Luz of her father, "Señorita, you have been away for a long time." A long time, yes. Luz pressed her palm against her open mouth as her mother's hand had silenced her screams of terror that last night in Guatemala, while they fled blindly in the dark. Pinpoints of light threaded through the trees and distant gunfire came closer. They ran on. But that was a long time ago, and this pencil pusher was not going to block her path. She summoned the spirit of her mother to her side, not the pale and wasted woman in the drab New Hampshire apartment who'd lost all hope, but the beautiful fighter from her childhood. Luz had promised her mother to return. So she straightened and found her voice, although she hesitated over the fluid cadences of her native language, which she'd seldom used in the months since her mother's death. I had a good job working as a nanny in Florida, Luz lied. but I missed being home. The second part, at least, was true. Ah, that is a good reason for your beautiful smile. Bienvenida, senorita. Welcome home. Luz claimed the bulging suitcase containing all she had left in the world. Customs inspectors waved through the throngs of tourists with their dollars or euros to spend on hotels and nice restaurants, on embroidered skirts and handbags, carved masks, tour guides to Mayan ruins. But for those with Guatemalan passports, the line dragged as inspectors upended suitcases and poked through the contents to exact the proper duty for every single item purchased abroad. Luz had receipts for new shoes and a small radio, and she had double and triple checked her paperwork for the all-important black jar lying, swaddled in layers of clothes, in the center of her suitcase. Unlike immigration, even the worst stickler at customs could only gouge her for a few extra quetzales. In any event, it was an efficient woman who totaled the receipts on a handheld calculator and presented Luz with a modest bill. Taxi drivers swarmed when she walked outside, but she waved them off. Richard had told her to turn left outside the terminal, walk past the taxi stand and a multi-story parking lot to a covered bus stop at the intersection with the main road. Then take the number 83 bus into the city. She was to sit in an empty row on the right side of the bus, near the middle, placing her suitcase so it blocked the adjoining seat. After a few stops, a man would get on and ask her in gringo-accented Spanish if he could sit. He would carry a folded prensa libre, the inaccurately named morning newspaper that was no free press at all, but the propaganda arm of the Benavides, which Martin had started a decade earlier when he was still president of the country. The man would leave the newspaper when he got off. In it, Luz would find an envelope containing specifics about the coming days, details about how she would get close enough to kill the man who murdered her father. Ahead of Luz, a small boy wrestled with a stroller while his mother, baby on her hip and suitcase in her other hand, tried to help him steer. The group wobbled with inches from traffic streaming into the airport. The woman turned as Luz approached. She raised her hand and began a hesitant smile that evaporated when the woman glanced at Luz's heavy suitcase. She dropped her hand, smoothed her child's hair, and swung around. With the pause in their progress, the little boy let go of the stroller. One arm wrapped around his mother's leg, the other scratched his cheek. The stroller slid toward the curb. 3 steps, and Luz was beside them. She shot out a hand to steady the stroller. "Can I help?" A line of sweat beaded the woman's upper lip. The baby, red-faced and crying, pulled at her hair. A bundled-up toddler lolled in the stroller. "But you have your hands full already." Luz stifled a chuckle. The boy couldn't be more than 3. The child in the stroller looked too young to walk, and a baby in arms. "Not nearly as full as yours, senora." "That is very kind of you." The woman considered her straggling brood. "Perhaps you could carry Tomas?" She grimaced as she untangled a chubby hand from her hair and held out the crying baby. "Of course," Luz said, regretting her impulsiveness. But the baby, warm and smelling of sour milk, curled against Luz's chest. Tiny fingers clutched the front of her shirt, and with a tremulous shudder, Tomas closed his eyes. Perhaps his reaction was a testimonial to her daycare experience. More likely, the child was simply too spooked to complain. "I'm Teresa. My children," she said, with a sweep of her chin encompassing infant, little boy, and swaddled child in the stroller. "We've been visiting my parents." A bus rolled up shortly after the little caravan reached the bus stop. It was a school bus, in shape and size exactly like the ones Luz had ridden to high school in New Hampshire. There the resemblance ended. This one was painted tomato red. Exuberant drawings of parrots and monkeys decorated white triangles on the side. Garlands of pink plastic flowers wound around the luggage rack. Teresa shooed the older boy ahead and then clambered on board, kicking the stroller up 1 step at a time. Luz followed, baby Tomas in her arms. The boy took the window seat behind the bus driver. Teresa jammed the stroller next to him and then sat across the aisle. Teresa scooted over, an invitation. Luz couldn't walk to a middle seat in the middle, holding Teresa's baby. One simple instruction, and she'd already screwed up. The baby's soft hair tickled her cheek as her arm tightened around the tiny sleeping bundle. Time to give him back. When Richard had broached the possibility of Luz's participation in his operation, he first spent a long time systematically making his case against the Benavides, their control of the major pipeline funneling cocaine from the fields of Peru via Colombian labs to North American markets, their negotiations with an organized crime distribution ring in the U.S. that would vastly increase the efficiency with which coke found its way to street corners all over the country, the importance of crippling the cartel before that happened. Gradually, the noose of his logic tightened, and Luz got a tantalizing glimmer of the question he would pose. By the time Richard suggested she might be the person who could get close enough to kill Martin Benavides, Luz had simply said, yes. But Richard couldn't know the lightness in her limbs, as though she had sprouted angel wings and was turning cartwheels in heaven, dancing for joy at the prospect of killing. She had no business pretending to be a good person. Luz loosened unresisting fingers from her shirt and planted a feather-light kiss on the baby's head. Tomas arched his back and stared open-mouthed into Luz's 4-foot soul and reached for his mother, who opened her arms to claim him. Luz continued up the aisle, alone. She'd never taken this route from the airport into town. When Luz was little, the closest she got to an airplane was her father pretending to be one as he ran up mountain tracks with her on his back, both of them with their arms outstretched and careening side to side, laughing. And when she and her mother were evacuated, it was from a postage stamp mountain clearing, both of them spattered with their father's blood. But alone and mute in their shock, they'd clung together on the floor of the helicopter, its back gaping open, and watched their dizzying ascent as the pilot swerved to avoid incoming flak, until their life in Guatemala disappeared and only the darkness remained. A man sprinted from the pharmacia on the corner and hopped on. He paid the fare, pushed sunglasses to the top of his head. When he walked up the narrow aisle, however, his dark copper hair brushed the low school bus ceiling, and the sunglasses slid back. Although he retrieved them with an athletic backhand catch before they hit the dirty floor, a blush spread over his pale cheeks. Hunching his shoulders in a vain attempt to make himself shorter, the man looked briefly at her. His jaw, set in a determined frown, told Luz he had a job to do. He wasn't a slumming American tourist taking the cheap bus into the city. This had to be her contact. Con permiso? He asked when he got to her. Luz checked for the newspaper. Yes, tucked under his arm. Without speaking, she began to shift the heavy leather suitcase closer to her feet. It caught against a broken fitting on the seat in front of her. As Luz attempted to maneuver it, the man pushed from his side. The bus lurched away from the curb, the bag shifted, and the tall man toppled into the seat next to Luz. His nose squashed against her temple. She smelled spicy aftershave. Sorry, he said, ears scarlet, freckles standing out on his cheeks. In Luz's fantasies about her arrival, this contact, was always a military man, taciturn, with a crew cut, a gun in a shoulder holster, a scar on his cheek. But this guy, with his freckles and the gold hoop in his ear, was hardly older than she, and looked like a strong wind would blow him all the way to the ocean. Luz smiled. She imagined tapping his arm and asking why he wanted Martin Benavides dead. She didn't realize she'd laughed out loud until she turned, startled. She swallowed. Preparing to kill, even when it was simple justice, an eye for an eye, exiled her from the rest of humanity. The lesson of Teresa and her baby fresh in her mind, Luz shifted closer to the window and fixed her eyes on the passing scenery. The bus chugged along, picking up and dropping off passengers. When they veered onto a busy avenue, the man settled the tight rectangle of the newspaper on the seat between them. He stood, hand grasping the metal bar above the seat, and a soft current of air passed between them, separating them further. The man didn't speak. He lifted his hand and pushed his way toward the front of the bus, leaving Luz alone. The clouds, which had earlier been white, billowy meringues in a dazzling blue sky, had darkened. Now storm clouds, thick, massed over the western mountains. Through the dusty, half-open bus window, Luz watched the clouds drop toward the city, foiled, thick and dirty, like the forward line of an advancing army. A single gray shadow broke off from the rest and covered the sun. A crack of lightning, the smell of ozone in the air. The street vendors scrambled to lay sheets of plastic over their wares. Women with shopping bags took shelter in doorways as if they could escape the coming storm. Luz knew she couldn't escape. She slid the newspaper into her bag. You want to know what happens next? I want to know what happens next. Can you completely see that as a movie? Is that not the most cinematic thing you've ever heard? I mean, really feel it and smell it and hear it and taste it and think about what Luz must feel meeting a contact on a bus in Guatemala City on her way to kill the man who ruined her family. So there's a goal. There's a goal for you. And again, that is Toward the Light by Bonnar Spring. And it gets more exciting and more exciting as the book continues. Wasn't that great? Wasn't that so great? It was really, Bonnar is saying, I want you to do my audiobook. Oh, yes. Thank you so much, sister. That's very sweet of you. But it was really fun to read. Thank you. A really cinematic and wonderful book. So again, Toward the Light by Bonnar Spring. The tension, Kristen is saying, oh, what happens next? Yeah, and we know, and that's just chapter 1. And people are saying, Jen is saying, I can't wait to read it. Patricia says, certainly got my attention. Sharon's saying, so exciting. Awesome, Bonnar. Yeah, I mean, that is, it's interesting when you hear a book read out loud, isn't it? It does add a different texture to the book. So it's really fun. Hannah Mary McKinnon, hi Hannah, who is listening today too, and I really talk about how much fun it is to bring these books to life and introduce them to you. So Jen is saying, felt like I was on the bus. Yeah, and so sweet to bring up Tomas, that little boy that shows that Luz is really has a warm heart and is a loving person, but she is on a mission. So I hope you all have a great day, a great Thursday. I hope it's not as hot where you are as it is here in Boston. And I hope you've had fun this morning. And will you tell your friends, please, 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 about First Chapter Fun. Bonnar will be, of course, on Facebook to answer all your questions and to see who wins in the giveaway. There are rules that Bonnar put in the what do you call those things? Comments on Facebook. And so if you respond, you will be entered for a prize. Thank you, Bonnar, for that. So onward to episode 72, which is completely amazing even to think about that we are doing up to episode 72 and so many cool books coming up. You will not want to miss one of them. Next, look at this evocative, gorgeous cover. This is Summer Darlings by Brooke Lee Foster. And listen to the blurb on the front. I was immediately seduced by Summer Darlings. This is one terrific summer read. And that is from Ellen Hildebrand, who is about as perfect a summer book writer as you can possibly imagine. And I know I cannot wait to read this over the weekend. Brooke Foster's Summer Darlings. Look at that bathing suit. Isn't that completely evocative of the time? Are you seeing this on Facebook? Anyway, so thank you so much for being here to share Toward the Light with us today in our fast virtual trip to Guatemala, courtesy of Bonnar Springs and Ocean View Publishing. Take care. We love you. We will see you on Tuesday for Summer Darlings. And until then, stay safe, stay kind, and we will see you next time. Have a wonderful day.